This week in the enterprise news, I'm joined by none other than Mr. Joff Thayer. We're going to discuss White Hat Security's single-page application scanning. Palo Alto Network makes an acquisition. KnowBe4 is in the news this week with some new security awareness training. Symantec has an announcement about security in the cloud. Splunk is messaging on the IoT security problem. In our interview segment, we have a pre-recorded interview from Microsoft Ignite with none other than Doug White from Secure Digital Life, one of our shows. He interviews the CTO of Microsoft, Mark Russinovich. It's going to be an awesome interview. It is pre-recorded. It was done live at Microsoft Ignite. So stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Improve the efficiency and effectiveness of your security operations with DF Labs security orchestration, automation, and response technology. Automate threat containment, orchestrate incident response, and measure operational performance with DF Labs in-command SOAR platform. Leverage your current security resources to minimize incident resolution time, maximize analyst efficiency, increase the number of incidents handled, and reduce overall risk. In-command SOAR acts as a force multiplier, enabling your security team to do more with less. Streamline the full incident response lifecycle automation process today. Keep your cybersecurity incidents under control with DF Labs. Visit dflabs.com/security weekly and request to see in-command SOAR live in action. Stop attackers from domain credential theft and lateral movement with a 99% success rate by using artificial intelligence to control the attacker's perception of the environment. Javelin Networks is the world's first endpoint intrusion containment platform to protect domain networks. Javelin detects targeted attacks and breaches by obfuscating Active Directory, domain controllers, domain identities, domain credentials, and all domain resources. It only takes one compromised machine to jeopardize the entire organization. Don't be a victim. Visit javelin-networks.com and request a demo of AD Protect today. Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer's sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live. Welcome to episode 110 of Enterprise Security Weekly for October 10th, 2018. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian. I'm joined by Mr. Joff Thayer, who's wearing his Aussie hat, I'll call it. Is that like from the land down under? Is that...
It's my, it's my Wild West Hackenfest hat, and I actually did acquire this hat in Deadwood, South Dakota last year. So I'm wearing it in anticipation of the upcoming Wild West Hackenfest.
That's awesome. Is it wildwesthackenfest.com, right? Is the website for that?
I believe that is correct, sir. Yes.
It's awesome. Everyone should be attending that conference. I can't attend. I apologize. I won't be there, but everyone else should go because it's awesome.
I am looking forward to seeing a bunch of great people as usual. We just came back from DerbyCon and we saw just an amazing attendance there. And we're looking forward to seeing some of the same folks. We've got some great talks lined up. I think it's going to be a good time.
Yeah, I was talking with Ed Scotus, who said he's going to be giving a talk at Wild West Hackenfest, which is great.
Yep. Ed, we've got some other interesting ones. I don't want to... I will drop one. Paul Vixie of DNS fame, I believe, is going to be giving a talk at Wild West, at least unless he's pulled out, which I hope not. So there's going to be some interesting talks there. I think it's going to be a great con.
Fantastic. Just an announcement, if you're interested in how to analyze and investigate malicious JavaScript attacks, that'll be happening tomorrow from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You can go to securityweekly.com/domain tools and register for that now. Okay, and now the security news, Joff. I know you were filling in kind of last minute for the show. Hopefully you got a chance to read some of the stories that we have out there. I thought they were pretty decent stories this week, Joff.
Yeah, I thought the collection was good. I did get a chance to read over a few of them. Although, yes, I was roped in at the last minute. So, hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
The first story is Splunk unveiling the first IoT platform for its customers. And to be quite honest, Joff, like, I wasn't sure what they were getting at. Like, I understand what Splunk is, right? I know what IoT is. I don't understand what a lot of the Splunk solutions do, and they talked about specific modules, in the Splunk platform. And I don't understand exactly what they do. They kind of touted it as giving operational technology or OT teams in the organization some insights into the security of their IoT devices, but I wasn't sure what they were jiving at in their messaging, to be honest with you.
No, I wasn't real sure either. I was reading through that, and I got the sense that they were going after what I look at as sort of the security hygiene 101 stuff. I hate to use the word hygiene, but I will. It's the best fitting word, and that is visibility first, right? Yeah, that's great, but where are we going beyond that? It didn't seem very clear to me.
Mm. I understand the problem, right? I also understand that if you work in industrial control systems, that it is very different. And the different verticals within industrial controls also have very different requirements. They mentioned oil and gas, power, transportation, energy, and utilities. Those are all very different verticals, of course, with a very different set of problems. And I think it's really hard for traditional security companies to break into that space. I found that and I'm sure you found as well, Joff, that when you work with people who work in industrial control systems, it's like that chicken and egg problem. They want you to have experience working in industrial control systems, and unless you do, like, they're really not interested in, working with you because you don't have the experience, which I get, but like, how do you get the experience if you don't have the experience in the first place, right? And what I always advise people, in fact, I was speaking with people at DerbyCon about this. They're like, I really want to get into industrial control systems and the security. I'm like, you got to get a job working for those companies. It's going to be really hard if you don't have the background. You almost have to, like, my path in when I did my brief stint in ICS security was to work with the fine folks at Digital Bond and Dale Peterson, right? And I was working largely on projects that had more of a crossover into traditional security than in ICS. And I imagine that if I had stayed there, I would have, gradually worked my way into working on more ICS and operational technology specific projects as I gained the respect of the people working there. But that's a really hard industry to break into, both from career path and I think from security vendor standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree. And actually, I was just thinking about the way that Splunk's coming at it right now seems to be a combined operational and security play in the messaging. And as I think about that, if you roll back into the early years of when security, met the traditional IT world, desktop and servers, we did start with that place of sort of combined security operational plays. And it took a little while before the maturity curve moved forward and we actually split out away from, combined plays that had operational and security capability. So it's almost like the same maturity curve is going to have to play out.
Yeah, and we've done a couple of briefings with ICS security firm called Clarity. I think one of the things we talked about that, they're saying is getting better is that blend between IT and OT. And like you said, Jeff, we've been talking about that for some time. They are seeing, a trend where it is moving towards more of a collaboration, and that's good. But it's a slow, it's still a slow ramp up, but we are making progress. So that's what I'm told from doing briefings with, Clarity, who's a major player in the ICS security solutions today. I added this next one, for DC area startups that have gotten some funding. And there's some folks in there you probably recognize, maybe some that you don't. I, very closely track the funding rounds of all security companies. We talk about it a little bit on this show, Joff, and more so on Business Security Weekly. The ones that you might recognize if you were at DerbyCon, for example, you notice that Scythe got a funding round. Ron Gula of Gula Tech Adventures was one of the players in there, who's of course been on the show before. And we're working with several of the companies he's investing in. I always track the companies that Ron's investing in, right? Like, it's just like if Ron's going to invest in you, you got something special, in my opinion. And that's, of course, biased because I've known Ron for some time.
Sure.
And, of course, worked with him at Tenable. Site's got some really cool stuff. We got a chance to catch up with Bryson, as I'm sure many people did at DerbyCon. I saw him there. He was very busy doing demos and talking with the DerbyCon attendees, getting the message out there about the solution. So,
yeah, I really enjoyed talking with him, and I do recognize that name. And I think it's really interesting to see more funding coming in. In general, I think the here I go with another cliche acronym. I think the ecosystem is looking very healthy right now, and let's hope that that continues to hold. I think it's all good stuff.
I think there's a lot of emerging categories. I think attack simulation is one of them where Scythe plays in. I just did a briefing with an API security company, Salt Protection. It's just fantastic niches, right? And categories that are emerging, it's exciting to see funding, in those areas where we're thinking about security differently, right? These new categories are being created either on purpose, trying to push a new idea, or just out of the natural evolution of what's happening in the industry. I think another one of those areas is certainly the open source security components, the security of those components in your software development lifecycle. And there was a Maryland-based software company called Sonatype. They just got $80 million in VC funding, and they're in that open source protection space with White Source and Sneak and a bunch of others in that realm. So I have not done briefings yet we can only do so many briefings with so many companies. We do push in the areas, especially of these new categories that I believe and the team believes are exciting. So we hope to get more information from a lot of these companies and figure out what their unique perspective on the problem is, which is an exciting part of my job today, which isn't the most technical, but I think as we were establishing in the past couple of weeks, it does require a lot of technical expertise to kind of dig into what all these companies are doing.
That's absolutely true. And one of the interesting things that I found in examining some of the emerging solutions is there does seem to be a trend on the offensive side, which is where I work, where some of the menial labor of penetration testing, the menial labor of putting together essentially sequences of process is starting to be automated. And I'm very, very excited about that. I think it's a great trend to emerge and continue to grow because, the biggest complaint we hear out there from everybody is there's just not enough talented professionals. And so if we get to a point of maturity, we have got a lot of products that are automating a lot of the menial work, and we are applying the limited resource of the humans to the real thinking work. I think that's going to be a real distinguishing factor in the field, and I think it's going to be a real distinguishing factor that just helps overall scaling up the efforts that we clearly do have to scale.
Absolutely. It's interesting. The next story is about White Hat, which is always tried to strike that balance between automated testing and the human. And they've just added some capabilities for single page applications, which of course are difficult, right? It's, we're still, I think, seeing that trend as applications move forward, that they're using new technologies, and we've got to change the way we assess and defend those applications, certainly. So this announcement I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's good stuff. The trend I'm seeing, it's really funny. I'm doing one of these this week. More and more in the web page space, we are seeing the application of very heavyweight frameworks on the front end, things like Angular and related JavaScript frameworks. And then in the back end, we're seeing just exclusively RESTful or XML-based transactions. And so the whole paradigm is shifting really, really quickly in terms of the ability for vendors to be able to wrap their head around automated assessment. So it's good to see new offerings come to the table, given the entire shift and growth in that area.
Moving on to cloud security play, it's interesting. RedLock is a cloud security provider in that what they say is they're providing cloud forensics, suspicious activity detection, and compliance management for all of your cloud-based applications and infrastructure. And they were acquired for $173 million in cash by Palo Alto Networks, who is increasing their presence in the cloud security arena, of course, with this acquisition. And I think that's a direction they've been moving in, certainly in the past couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. Palo is doing some interesting things to get real end-to-end visibility, and I think this is just part of that strategy, which is really good. I mean, they couldn't sit there as a firewall IPS vendor forever. It's important to get a greater end-to-end visibility in order for them to execute and really stay out front.
Yeah, and I mean that's how the larger companies are surviving is by not so much pivoting but diversifying into the other areas. And Palo Alto has had a number of acquisitions that have taken them into a lot of different spaces. The problem is that how do you integrate those technologies quickly enough and change your messaging and increase awareness of what you've done? I'm biased, but our sponsor Rapid7 I think has been doing a good job at tying together both acquisitions and internal technologies and having a coherent and cohesive story to tell about that, which is constantly evolving. And I'm thankful that they're partnered with us so we can help them do that. Not every company is like that, right? Like
Right.
if you work in security today and you were to ask people like, what does Palo Alto do? Like 90% of the time, people are going to say, well, they're a next-gen firewall provider, right? And they're like, oh yeah, they got like some kind of endpoint thing. But I think a lot of people are missing the whole story. And the reason I say that, it's not to pick on Palo Alto, but because it could be like a really awesome thing that can help a lot of organizations solve problems, but it's hard to navigate those waters, right? I mean, that's why we do the show, right? Is to help people navigate those waters. But I feel like that gets lost when the company gets large and starts acquiring and integrating companies.
Absolutely, and it takes a while for them to get their messaging changed and moved forward, right? So that sort of statement that you hear from people is essentially the 4-year-old marketing instead of what they're trying to message now. So it's quite fascinating. I don't envy the job of the marketing folks after acquisitions. But the other thing I think is interesting about acquisitions is I think you can sort of look at them in two ways. One thing that is true about an acquisition, if it's significant competition, is it certainly gets it out of the way. Whether the technology survives or not, it does eliminate that competition. I think it's sad if a company doesn't integrate it properly and take it forward, because I much rather see the success story of innovative products to continue integrating into other things than the opposite.
Yep. KnowBe4 also has an announcement. They're expanding its capabilities, what they call a virtual risk officer. Did you read this article, Joff? I didn't read it as closely as I should have, admittedly.
I started to dabble a little bit, but I have to admit I'm not up on this one either.
I don't understand it. It's powered by artificial intelligence, machine learning technologies, which are, well, let's just back up on that statement. Those are two very different things, which often get very confused in the market, as we know. It provides organizations with feedback and insight into their risk. It's complemented with advanced reporting that provides additional insights into cybersecurity operations and organizations. It includes a group report card that gives information to managers. I'm not sure how the virtual, whatever they called it, now I can't even, advanced reporting, and VRO is virtual risk officer. I thought that would be like a chat bot that like you ask questions and like gives you a score. I guess it's like a test. I'm not sure why it needs artificial intelligence. I don't know.
Well, it's not, I just was, reading through it again. It's not clear to me what level of audience they're trying to address. One thing that comes out is they certainly looking at the C-suite level of folks for sure, but then further down in the article here, they're talking about releasing APIs that allow it to interface with user and behavior analytics, which seems to be more of a technical play. So not quite sure what they're doing there.
I'm not sure either. I know there is a lot of innovation happening in this space. Certainly, we've seen that over the past few years with especially phishing protection, right? And then the phishing protection suite kind of tying into your awareness and training modules, right? So that all ties together in like a cohesive platform. So if you're, the victim of a phish and you click a link, you're automatically taken to somewhere where you're made aware of what you did, given the opportunity to train, and then maybe take some testing. And what I was hoping for is that this was going to help automate that process, but it's unclear how those pieces are fitting together for me.
Yeah,
which is not uncommon in a lot of the announcements that we cover on the show. Symantec is just hitting like announcement after announcement. Like, it's amazing. I mean, they're one of the largest security companies, right? And they're messaging on all kinds of different things. It's like completely different things. Like last week it was like DLP, or week before it was like DLP. Now they're talking about a cloud workload assurance that helps harden security configurations in the cloud, which seems to be a trend this week, which has always been a problem. And they're also throwing DLP in the mix, and terms like Cloud SOC and CASB and API and AWS. They're just trying to cram as many acronyms as they can into their announcement, Joff. I feel like I don't know if that's a strategy, but
I've liked some Symantec technologies. I'm not going to. I'm not necessarily going to say anything bad here, but it does seem like their marketing group tends to juggle all of the acronyms, reinvent things, and then message differently each following week or something like that.
Yeah.
So I kind of get that sense that seems to be what's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like, Palo Alto made that acquisition, and there's a lot of companies that, some of them are CASBs, and I know Matt Alderman, like, he has a rant, like similar to how John Strand was ranting about threat intelligence, right? Matt will rant about the CASB things. Like, how do you take all your cloud traffic and siphon it through one place to pretend to have some kind of security? He's got major issues with it. I think that's different from being able to assess the configuration of your cloud is one thing, like make sure that everything is configured the way that it should be. Right. In fact, we've got an interview coming up with Microsoft in Azure. Microsoft has native functionality that will help you with that. So we've got an interview coming up that was based on some of the experiences at Microsoft Ignite. That story made perfect sense to me, right? The individual vendors that can help you with that. Of course, you can go to your vulnerability management providers. And even when I was working at Tenable, there was a lot of messaging about how you evaluated what was in the cloud. Like, how do you do vulnerability management when half of your infrastructure is up on the cloud? How do you detect machines if they're coming on and offline very, very quickly? How do you manage the configuration it's not so much the OS configuration, but like, what's the configuration in AWS? And there's like 8 million products. Okay, so maybe a couple hundred in AWS itself. How do you know they're all being deployed and managed correctly? And that gave birth to this whole new category of vendors, which I think is separate from CASB, and there might be some intersections there. But it's very confusing if you're in a hybrid cloud environment, for example, and getting a handle on your configuration and your security architecture that's in the cloud. It's still hugely challenging today.
Yeah, I find it very interesting how the developments are going there. In some ways, I really love the idea that, cloud has freed us to do so many things that the physical assets were just boat anchors and really difficult to deploy and move around quickly. And all the operational convenience has been great. But I think from the security industry perspective, we're all trying to get our heads around how do we get that equivalence now of the visibility into the network, of the visibility into the different stacks, of what the intrusion activity really looks like in the cloud, and then, like you said, what the configuration assessment, configuration management as it relates to that. I mean, there's just a lot there, and then sort of on the flip side as well. When you look at larger security vendors, not only are they talking about helping you assess your situation in cloud. They're talking about the fact that they're using the same or similar cloud resources for a lot of the data that they're processing. And so the other issue that comes up is, how much of my data are you taking away from my cloud into your cloud, and what's the risk of that? And there's a very, very large discussion in all of that.
Yeah, yeah. I think when we first started talking about cloud, we were starting to identify issues, and obviously it's here to stay. And I'm not sure that we've uncovered all the new use cases about the risks associated with cloud and how you get a handle on them. And I still don't think we have many of the right solutions today for that.
Yeah, I would agree. In the pen testing space, I can tell you that the cloud deployments in various products, but particularly I think in Microsoft Active Directory, have actually opened up opportunities for us that have not existed before. And I think a lot of that is related to appropriate application of configuration security, and that people just haven't caught up with yet. And also just not understanding how much of their organizational assets, especially in the directory itself, are being exposed with a cloud deployment and not adequately protecting it yet. I think that transition, as it does in the security world a lot, is opening up opportunities that didn't exist before. As people mature and get better, we'll see those opportunities close up again.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly it's they've made it easy to expose stuff to the internet. And I think, we've seen that
right.
with, as you deploy, and if an API is open to the internet, people abuse it now. We've seen that open S3 buckets, certainly. And, that's not just limited to S3. I mean, you got to look at your SaaS providers too. Has someone opened up a Dropbox share or a Google Drive share and shared stuff that they're not supposed to? It's actually an area of focus for me in terms of getting a handle on your external assets, and what are some easy ways to do that you can do internally without having someone come in externally and do that. I think that's still important, but I think that internal security teams can tackle this problem much better. I mean, some aren't tackling it all, but I think they can gain a lot more visibility just by doing some simple things that maybe aren't on a lot of internal security teams' radar in terms of things they're supposed to be monitoring.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, and I think there is sort of one school of thinking that may exist out there, and that is sort of the put the head in the sand school of thinking. I'm not going to adopt it. I'm going to stay with my data center. You can tear my iron racks from my cold dead hands. If you are one of those people out there, you are basically going to die the way of the dinosaur, because you just don't have the agility that those people who are embracing have in terms of deploying the resources. So we've all got to go through this maturity curve together. We've all got to get better. And I think we'll emerge out the other end in a better place, both operationally and security-wise.
Well, I think we need an IDaaS. That's what I think. An IDaaS, identity as a service, right?
This is fascinating to me. Identity management is such a huge topic to begin with.
Huge.
And to have, you look at Centrify spinning out its IDaaS business as a standalone company. I think that speaks a lot to the size of the industry there in identity management, and how many people truly at higher levels of scale need solid solutions for identity management done well.
The messaging is just like they managed to work in a lot of buzzwords, right? They're redefining a legacy approach to privilege access management with cloud architected zero trust privilege to stop the leading cause of breaches, which they say are privilege access abuse. Adaptive, which is their new spinoff, will deliver next generation access to protect employees, partners, and customers with their market leading IDaaS solution.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzzwords in there. I noticed in the next gen access paragraph here, we've got SSO, MFA, EMM, UBA, user behavior analytics. Lots of things thrown in there. It's like a it's like a very big soup of acronyms that they're promising. So
Yeah, I think, in defining what problem they solve, they're saying it's breaches, and specifically the cause of breaches being privileged access abuse. I think is not specific enough for me. Like what does that mean exactly? I like to be able to identify a problem that I have with a solution, and I'm not sure just calling it privileged access abuse is enough in enough detail for me to understand the problem that maybe I know I have, or maybe I don't know that I have the problem.
Well, the other thing about that, I mean, if you imagine and speculate for a minute, okay, again, I put my pen tester hat on, this is my pen tester hat for now. The privileged access abuse, absolutely, we abuse privileges where we can, and the organizations where most successful are those folks that basically have not controlled their privileged access. But by control, I mean plain old processes where they have laid down strict, stringent, both policy, standard, and process around privilege access management. So, if you have laid down stringent process and control, I'm not sure it matters where you implement it, to be honest, whether you're implementing it in the cloud or not. So what's the play? Where's the value add is what comes to my mind.
I agree, Joff. What I think is interesting in what you said is the word process, right? Is that you have to understand where your sensitive data is and what systems and applications you have and who has administrative or privileged access to them, and be able to manage and control that. And you're going to have a lot of different environments with a lot of different privileged users. You can consolidate those as much as possible, which is why they mentioned single sign-on, right? But it all starts with that process. And if you're going out to adopt technology to solve that problem, but you haven't defined the process and haven't defined where all your data lives and where all your applications are and what privileges people have, then how do you enforce a policy if you don't have those things?
Yeah,
you can't.
You got the whole solution in search of a problem. It's a cart before the horse, right?
In a lot of these solutions, I mean, you can get free evaluation trials, and this software will tell you, like, you've got, maybe these applications and these users have high privileges, but you got to know if they should or they shouldn't, right? And have some policy and process and documentation to define that before you start telling this tool to start ripping people's privileges out or revoking access to things.
Right. Well, we know how it happens in some organizations, of course. In some organizations, one person gets an idea. Hey, this is going to solve all my problems. They buy it. They throw it down on the IT group and say, here's what you need to implement. So that is the classic solution in search of a problem. Now, hopefully that is not the way that it happens in more mature organizations, because that's certainly not going to help.
Yeah. And, it's why I like the IT governance and data protection or classification solutions for that. I think you got to do some homework. I think they can help you with that homework and some of their evaluation tools as well, but you got to be willing to define a process, or at least be in the process of defining a process and enforcing that moving forward. I think it's more of a communication and process thing. And once you're committed to it, sure, you might not have all the pieces, and they can help you put those together. I like those solutions. I think those should certainly tie into a PAM solution. But I think a lot of people tend to put the cart before the horse, right? And not do things in order in that realm.
Yeah, it's the good old there is no silver bullet discussion, and there really isn't. The technology is not going to solve the problem. You sitting down and doing the hard work on the process is going to solve the problem. Then the technology is supportive of the problem from there on.
Yeah. Did you manage to get to many talks at DerbyCon, John?
Unfortunately, I didn't, but I don't feel bad about that, because I really enjoyed socializing around the different booths and just talking to interesting people in and out of the talks. For me, the networking aspect was just huge, and the fact that the talks are all streamed, and recorded is a real service. So again, Iron Geek and the video crew, you've done such a great job, because I can go back and look at them in evenings or whenever I feel like looking at them. and peruse the list, and that's actually preferred format for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I did the same thing. For sure. It was good. It was good times. So, make sure you check out the talk. There was a lot of, if you're interested, I think, in new attack kind of patterns, I thought the DerbyCon talks were fantastic for that. I think some of them were targeted on defense, and certainly we're bringing, folks on the show to talk about some of those things. In fact, tomorrow night, Omer from Javelin Networks will be on Paul Security Weekly to talk about his talk at DerbyCon. So
that's the one I need to watch. Yeah. And by the way, just a hint for the listeners: if you go out and you just Google Iron Geek DerbyCon 2018, you will find Adrian's page with all the video links on it. So you should definitely check that out.
Absolutely, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joff. With that, we're gonna take a short break, and you're gonna hear Mark Russinovich. Doug White interviewed him at Microsoft Ignite. Mark Russinovich is the CTO of Microsoft Azure. I said Microsoft before. Mark Russinovich is the CTO of Microsoft Azure. So stay tuned. That's coming up next.